Let this be a reminder to you all that this organization will not tolerate failure.
The side of the federal building has been blown off, Jesse.
They believe they were part of a CIA project called MK Ultra.
Just like a segment of society that is not living in reality.
In a certain sense, we're kind of a little bit more Israel's vassal state.
There are police chiefs facilitating prostitution networks.
Do you understand? It's all in your head. It's your move.
Whoa, what up, everybody? Welcome to the Underclass podcast with myself. Oh my God. I have no idea what I'm doing right now. I'm trying to actually set up the custom layout in StreamYard, and apparently I'm struggling. But yeah, not at all surprised because it's been a while since I've actually done a solo live stream. But I do have to say, hold on, let me see if I can finally get this figured out. All right, fuck it, that'll work. Okay, so obviously, welcome to the Underclass podcast with myself, Austin Wade Picard. So I've been wanting to do a solo stream of consciousness episode for quite some time, just to kind of like, I guess, workshop a few different ideas that obviously I've been kind of accumulating information for quite some time, you know, in terms of just in preparation to discuss on other shows, obviously Already Dead being one of them. But whatever this is a weekly paywalled show that I do something very similar. But I will say that the main goal is to basically, first of all, engage directly with the audience, like I was doing with the Morning Dump whenever I was obviously streaming the morning show with Jose for a short time. But so I kind of have been missing that opportunity for quite a while. What's up, guys? How you guys doing? What's up, Jose's in the chat? Oh man. Yeah, so obviously I stayed up way too late, as is always the case. I think it was like 2 a.m. when I finally went to sleep. But yeah, I felt like, honestly, the main goal is to discuss certain topics and ideas and concepts that appeal to me directly that I haven't been able to necessarily present in other forums. And also, after maybe the relevant period of time has passed, and I guess to a certain extent, it would feel a little bit strange to almost force the issue, right, in the flow of a normal conversation at times. So, yeah, let's hope it's not 6 hour long stream. But yeah, I think I'm gonna have to pull the cord just before we get to that point. But yeah, good to see you guys too. And man, I think what's interesting is that I was, first of all, I think it was I forget now, because directly after we discussed Hunter S. Thompson and the snuff film allegations and things of that nature on a recent episode of Already Dead, which was all due to a call-in from a patron, which is honestly a friend at this point. But I had someone reach out to me directly who I actually met at the last Bohemian Grove. And they were sort of asking me to elaborate and provide details on exactly how Hunter S. Thompson connected to the Esalen Institute and things of that nature. So I thought, to begin with, it would kind of be important to, at the very least, well, because I thought we could chart a course to basically the occult origins of MK Ultra and how it kind of intersects with pop culture. And what I view as, because if you remember, whenever I covered the Laurel Canyon episode, right, weird scenes inside the canyon, basically I was introduced to the concept of the term Hollywood in general, right? And I kind of thought that the origin of Hollywood and Hollywood land was always fascinating to me, and I think it was um, originally Hollywood, right? It derives from the wood of the holly tree, right? Which was one of the favorite. Basically, it was the favorite type of wood used by druid magicians for their wands composition. And that in itself just resonated with me because if you consider the notion of casting a spell on the general public and utilizing a pop culture as a vessel and a very viable tool to effectively achieve that, then it becomes almost an inherent obligation for us to effectively attempt to break that very spell. And I believe this spell has essentially it's very much been reinforced and reestablished throughout many different generations ever since the foundation of Hollywood in itself, but also just the effectiveness of pop culture and even literary concepts over the course of human civilization. So understanding in that context, really sort of the '60s counterculture revolution and the hippie movements and things of that nature being weaponized to discredit obviously it's the most surface level interpretation of what it would deliberately attempt to undermine, which would be this organic grassroots movement that was effectively forming in regard to naturally opposing the Vietnam War or just becoming anti-war or a part of the movement at the time, which would effectively be a direct threat to the U.S. military interests. And so I think, what better way than to corrupt the culture of an entire generation, which, I mean, it would effectively compromise them from ever even honestly posing a threat to the permanent establishment in general. And so I think just understanding these deceitful techniques that they've been cultivating in order to manufacture culture and in this very covert, socially engineered psychological operation spanning, again, generations of diabolical influence, it begins to take a toll. And so, this is Hollywood has been casting a spell, malevolently manipulating the minds of the general public for years. I mean, just decades, as I said. So it's honestly incredible to realize that these just the culture creation mechanisms of social engineering and how they've been very much relied upon for generations. And just honestly, one more example is gonzo journalism and Hunter S. Thompson and he himself just kind of individually had a profound influence and impact on me at a young age. Um, Also, kind of Jim Morrison and The Doors, and I kind of grew up. Maybe it was my parents' generation that introduced me to these avenues of pop culture interest, which kind of paved the path for me to inevitably embrace drug culture, things of that nature, which are only self defeating. And I think that's also by design. But so I kind of unfortunately embraced these negative pop culture influences and if you consider even Jim Morrison and The Doors, right? This is a direct connection again to Aldous Huxley, which we'll draw that connection very soon because I think what's interesting is that through Aldous Huxley, right, we can effectively chart the course between Tavistock, the Esalen Institute, the origin of MK Ultra and the occult influence, as well as because obviously it's like this occult ideology is infused with this new age scientific method of behavioral modification experimentation. And so I think understanding this, and then also I didn't realize, honestly, Aldous Huxley was basically he and Aleister Crowley were personal friends for quite some time, and I found that to be very interesting. I was reading The Devils of Lodoon. Yeah, The Devils of Lodoon. We'll have to go through this in a moment. It's one of his Aldous Huxley's more kind of just as far as like pop cultural influence and the works in which people kind of recognize him from. It's one of the more under recognized works of his and books of his that's very much drenched in mind control and the occult, and I find it very strange. But we'll get into that as well. But again, it's the fact that Aleister Crowley and Aldous Huxley were personal friends, and he's supposed to be this philosophical intellectual mind that should stand the test of time, right? And I will say Aldous Huxley has some incredible quotes, but if anything, it's only a window into the mind manipulators and how they very much overexpose themselves, and it's like they fashion the noose around their own necks at times with the level of statements and overt claim, yeah, well, just overt acknowledgement, that they're willing to go on the record, whether it be some sort of speaking forum or, it's just fascinating. But either way, well, what's interesting to me is that Aleister Crowley and Aldous Huxley effectively met in Berlin in 1930, I believe is the story. And this is apparently when Aleister Crowley introduced Aldous Huxley to mescaline, which, of course, Aldous Huxley would become a major prominent figure in terms of hallucinogenics and just clearly how psychedelics would affect the intellectual mind and modern civilization and also just culture in the West. And it really led to the foundation of the human potential movement, which is very much new age in itself. So Huxley would ultimately inspire the foundation of the new age human potential movement, which was basically founded at the Esalen Institute. So that's essentially a kind of brief rundown as to how I believe this course could be navigated in a real way, intellectually speaking. So that is the goal as of right now. But I will say, just as far as like kind of a little bit of housekeeping, it's just, I think I should probably do more of these solo live streams of consciousness occasionally, if only for my own well-being, because the way in which my mind works, I get bogged down into these never-ending rabbit holes. And so whenever I kind of have to pivot into all these various different directions, which I do think is also a strong point, but can easily derail the intellectual path we are attempting to chart. And so again, this is the main goal, is to be able to essentially manage the overflow of information that is kind of bouncing around in my mind's eye. And then also, yeah, Brave New World. Obviously, I've mentioned Brave New World in a few different episodes, I believe, just in quotation. I would quote Huxley to almost provide the theme, the really the kind of just the conceptual thematic value to the episode itself that will provide us with this almost callback, reinforcing sort of it's interesting how I attempt to kind of stage my solo projects, but I always thought it was just, he always has provided this philosophical avenue into understanding how many of these let's just say mind war operatives and the the insulated oligarchy have been operating for generations at this point. And so anytime we can be blessed with a credible window into how these people think, and especially how they view us, there's value to that. There's something, I think, just extraordinarily important to at least adding that to your toolbox of of accumulating a fundamental understanding as to the threat they are posing to us as a society at large. So, but yeah, so again, it's I never really kind of expected that there would be this direct connection to I mean, obviously, I knew Aldous Huxley and the Doors of Perception led to the Jim Morrison basically naming the band The Doors based off of that work by Aldous Huxley, The Doors of Perception. But it also the human potential movement and this new age occult ideology within it very much I mean, it very much introduced the psychedelic nature of how you could break free, right? So if you remember, just the ridiculous mantra that was being passed around as the only solution at the time, and it did very much undermine a generation of just even a revolutionary mindset. You know, it kind of neutered that concept, and so you know, and to kind of reinforce the idea of manufactured pop culture to not only revelation of the method, but to subtly and subconsciously introduce occult concepts to the subconscious mind of the average person who's very much unaware and in no way an initiate. It's become just one of the most pivotal and effective, I believe effective and very much frequently and consistently utilized on a daily basis to push this undermining self-defeating agenda into all of modern society, but especially in the West and in our obsession with Hollywood and Hollywood culture and the Hollywood industrial complex, right? So, yeah, human potential movement intentionally harmful or well-meaning but unintentionally harmful. Yeah, you know, that's a good question. Now, I think just the idea that you had so much CIA involvement with Esalen, so much with the psychedelic movement as well. I believe that the entire concept of the human potential movement was in reality a new age occult ideology being subtly and covertly, you know, in a real sense, permeate. It was a way in which they could almost inject it into the modern framework and culturally speaking, to where it would begin to permeate throughout modern society in a way that would subconsciously take root in all of us, whether we know it or not. You're basically beating back the conditioning and the level of programming that we have all been forced to endure, and unfortunately we wake up and at a very young age we are inherently at a disadvantage, and that is by design as well. That is why modern society is structured in this way. And so you see, people should be far more aware of John David Norman's Odyssey Foundation than they are of Christopher Nolan's latest godforsaken version of the Odyssey, right? It's like this. This is an example of mainstream culture, but also culture in the West. You know, it's like we are just so low hanging fruit, low frequency interpretations of art. Everything is just an appeal to emotion, an appeal to authority. We all are, and I'm sorry to speak in blanket statements or even lump ourselves into this collectivist brain rot, but this is a co-opting cultural touchstones. We've talked about it recently, right? In terms of Under the Silver Lake, and this has become commonplace among the mind war operatives. And man, you see how Christopher Nolan is just absolutely destroying the Odyssey for an entire generation, with no one even really batting an eye at this point. Between Travis Scott and Elliot Page and Helen of Troy, I mean, it's just completely unbelievable the state of the Hollywood industrial complex at this point in its current form. But sadly, this is nothing new, right? So I just like, and we'll, again, I don't want to belabor the point, but I should, at the very least, I did want to mention in passing and play a couple of videos to reinforce this idea, especially in context with the Odyssey, right? Which again, it's like if you guys have ever watched Troy, right? Especially like the director's cut, like it's a great movie, man. It's stands the test of time. It's they really attempted, to remain true to the literary concepts and man, just to see what Christopher Nolan's adaptation has become is just obviously it's no surprise if if you're aware of how Hollywood is utilized in this way. But for it to be kind of at the forefront and being promoted as the leading example and probably the greatest film of the year sort of thing in the way in which it's being um, just spoken on by the critics. And then people I love and respect who obviously are much more plugged into the Hollywood state of mind. And I think a lot of this is just a consequence of this this very naive, childish, philosophical perspective on life, and it's something that people never can quite reject or push to the wayside or overcome after after they leave the prison that was the public school structure. And I just feel like the popularity contest that never really ended as far as that concept in the minds of the vast majority of people. They just want to go with the trend, and that makes them comfortable because anyone who bucks the trend, man, it forces them to overanalyze and reconsider and it's very uncomfortable, right? To have to reflect and reshape your fundamentally your paradigm of power and how we are being deceived and how it's been systematically entrenched to co-opt this cultural mechanism to achieve that very end result. And so, anyway, I see, I see Christopher Nolan's Odyssey. Man, it's in IMAX. Everybody, you better go check it out. Absolutely not going to pay to watch this film. I will watch it just to critique it later on. Full disclosure, haven't watched it, so it's only from the asinine clips that I'm seeing come out from the Elliot page 5 minutes into the film, and then also just the casting. Like, my God, what are we doing? There are essentially some lines even that I saw where I think one of the lines is in the film is actually a real line of dialogue. I think it's time we go on an odyssey. Now tell me if that's true or not. But either way, that in itself almost deserves dismissing the value of the film. But I will say I would imagine that Christopher Nolan's always been able to produce a film that's visually appealing. So obviously, I'm sure the musical score is interesting. I would think they probably went out of their way to have this sort of modern adaptation involving modern music and things of that nature, which is another reason why Travis Scott is even cast as a character. But let's watch a couple clips just so you guys can kind of catch a glimpse of the most cartoonish aspects of this so far. And again, it's just this legitimately will have a consequence in terms of of at least undermining the value of the literary rights, just the literary reference that is so valuable to this very day and should stand the test of time so many young people will only be introduced to the Odyssey through this film and this film alone. And I hope that obviously isn't the case, but unfortunately it seems to have been for quite some time. And that is why you have generations not realizing that so much of what is produced and comes out of Hollywood is just, it's nothing new. Uh it's the same idea restructured and robbed of its soul is essentially what, and especially its cultural value. But here's an example of ancient Greece that we're supposed to take seriously, and I just thought this is so funny.
Why did you have to volunteer?
Don't you remember how I came here? I begged to take Antinous' place.
Perhaps you've heard of Helen. Face. I launched 1,000 ships. Maybe now just 500. So many left on the battlefields of Troy for that face.
For your brother's ambition. This one looks familiar.
No one is going to hurt you. My name's
That
your Lucas. What's your
in my
name?
opinion, but again, haven't gone and watched the film in its entirety for myself. Here's Travis Scott. There's one you'll absolutely love the longer form of Travis Scott just briefly, because it is essentially introducing the tale of the Odyssey. And again, beyond Elliot Page running to her death at the very beginning of the film, allegedly, this whole staging framework that Travis Scott provides, just again, it's like, what are we doing here? This is supposed to be artistically sound and valuable and one of the best films of the year. All right. So clearly, if you don't get my point, then maybe you didn't see the visual. It's just absolutely unbelievable for me that these casting decisions were made. Now, I will say, Uncle Ted's point, I have not watched the entire movie, as I said earlier. Full disclosure. Who the fuck is Travis Scott? Says John Black. Yeah, how do you not know who Travis Scott is, man? If you remember, wasn't it Astro World or something? What is that crazy ass like occult music festival that Travis Scott had that all those people died at one point? Let me check real quick. I'm basically, yeah, I'm positive. Here we go. Astro World Tragedy. Yeah, it was November 5th, 2021, when a crowd crush at the Astro World Festival in Houston, Texas, resulted in the deaths of 10 people and injuries to hundreds more. Now, it did look absolutely insane whenever you watch the footage, because it looked almost as if it was an occult ritual of some kind, where maybe a blood sacrifice was the goal. And so, and I remember I pulled like quite a few things in the past in regard to that, but that I just found it for him to have been the one cast, of course, right? It's not really that surprising, but there was there's two last clips, and then I'll move on from the Odyssey. I know it's ridiculous, but it's funny. Yeah, well, again, it's like there was so much satanic symbolism and things of that nature involved in the production of the Astro World Festival, especially that night, where, yeah, it looked like a ritual killing, right? And so, and then also knowing how many different hip hop artists, especially the more prominent figures, it seems as if these ritual sacrifices are necessary to perhaps move up in the initiate, as far as being of the initiated. And so it seems as if this is a part of the process in terms of potentially moving up in rank in regard to, or at the very least, maintaining your level of prominence and still having the level of production and support behind you in regard to the Hollywood industrial complex. And but who knows? Obviously, that's all pure speculation. It was just fascinating, and it did seem as if, yeah, he didn't stop the music and chanted over and over, is what Jason Leisure is saying in the chat. And yeah, again, all of this, um, I can barely remember the details, but I do recall whenever I watched it all play out, it being one of the most kind of obvious. Uh, it did not seem to be an accident. It seemed almost as if it was an orchestrated tragedy, and that's worth taking seriously, honestly, at this point. But so the last point on the Odyssey, and then I'll move on, is just the woke nature of like Ellen Page, now Elliot Page, obviously, being cast as basically of really one of the greatest warriors in this entire in the entire Odyssey, which is hilarious. And so that alone is almost an insult to anyone's intellectual fortitude. Like, if we're supposed to take this seriously, that is the major sticking point for me. Um, Obviously, that doesn't seem to bother very many people at this point. At least the vast majority of people don't seem to be bothered by the fact that all of these casting decisions are absolutely unbelievable. But still, and yeah, everyone's asking who the fuck Achilles is in this new version of the Odyssey, and it's like, again, watching Brad Pitt's version of Achilles back in the film Troy, and I think it was like 2004 or something when it came out. I mean, it's amazing, right? And even the Hector and Troy battle, or I mean the Hector and Achilles battle. Like, honestly, the fact that they even had, the military strategy of how it would effectively, be fought at the time, at least in terms of what we were intended to believe. And man, it's just like seeing how they orchestrated, the actual battles. It was fundamentally sound strategically, and so it just like made sense, and it was applicable, and also visually just one of the most enjoyable kind of as an audience member films to watch. And yeah, the woman who played Helen of Troy in the original Troy was far more believable to have launched right, a massive war than this insane casting decision for this woman, who is just honestly, I just can't even believe that this was a casting decision made. But still, and you heard the way she delivered that line, right, in the just that quick little sequence that we played a few moments ago. And again, it's just the most unbelievable thing. As an audience member, you should feel insulted, right? That's the main point that I'm attempting to make. And it's really even outside of the whole concept of like this being right, like I don't know, an individual attack of any kind. Like, obviously, I really don't care. I just think for them to act as if, as far as the Hollywood industrial complex and the major just production companies, and who are taking on this massive propaganda right, effort, it's just laughable that they would attempt to have us believe that this is honestly appealing to an audience. But still, you'll have people absolutely digging their heels in and becoming entrenched in this debate that it's worth as if it's worth having. But anyway, to kind of reinforce the comedic nature of the casting decisions made in this new Christopher Nolan film, here's Elliot Page, right, who's going to like it's so funny the way in which she actually runs. But this is one of my favorite memes that I've seen come out of this, and this isn't even actually a meme. This is just her reacting. Apparently, this happens all within the first 5 minutes of the film, so it's not really that much of a spoiler. And it almost even adds an extra comedic layer to it, because clearly you would think if they wanted to force this type of character down our throats, they would have her remain a more prominent part of the film. Yeah. Yeah, she is trans. Her name's Elliot Page now. It was Ellen Page, but yeah, dude. Hey, Nolan's always been. I love Memento. I love a lot of Christopher Nolan films, but that doesn't mean this is good.
Gift for Athena.
Okay, so you get my point, right? Is that this is clearly just one of the most ridiculous things that I've ever seen. And but there was one thing that came out of it that was at the very least worthwhile, and I will have to share this, if only because it brought me very much it brought me joy in regard to this character decision. So this is what would have happened if Elliot Page was cast as Brad Pitt's Achilles character in Troy. Get him, Elliot. Yeah, if Michael Bay directing that film, then maybe it would have actually come. No, I'm just playing. Michael Bay is absolutely ridiculous, and probably, at the very least, I think he could have sexually abused Juliette Bryant, the Epstein victim. And then the film, The Island, is absolutely insane. Obviously, if you consider the Epstein concept and just yeah. Anyway, that's an entirely other, it's an entire different conversation. But yeah. Anyway, I thought that only reinforces exactly what we're going to discuss in terms of the pop culture influence and also how they utilize it and weaponize these concepts to subconsciously indoctrinate the general public and especially the youth. And so younger generations who grew up watching these films and know nothing else, right? They don't have prior context. Unless their parents are doing their job and actually providing them with I don't know, a cinematic history worth knowing. It's like those things are worthwhile. And another reason why you should take it upon yourself to educate your own children, because my God, if you leave it up to the state, which is how modern society has been structured, then here we are. Elliot Page is allegedly one of the most valiant Greek warriors, right? In the Odyssey, which is just like, my God, man, it just absolutely cripples my soul realizing that people are taking this seriously, and also the fact that it's affecting. I have visions of the people that I know and love that I know are directly being affected by this in the worst possible way, and they're beautiful people. They mean well. They have the best of intentions. It's just this is the appeal to emotion, the appeal to authority, the conditioning and the mind control, the one nation under mind control, my friends. That's just the reality. And so again, I'm not saying any of these directors haven't made wonderful films in the past that I have appreciated as well. But you clearly see my point in the fact that there will come a time when they will absolutely force you. This is where you can no longer compartmentalize. This is why I didn't watch Don't Look Up, that ridiculous document or not documentary, but ridiculous Netflix film with Leonardo DiCaprio and Jonah Hill and all these people. It's like, why would you go watch anything other than to provide yourself with the critique that it deserves, right? Why else would you go overexpose yourself to something that you know is intended to demoralize you and rob you of what is beautiful in life and art in regard to appreciation? It's like, man, they're trying to spin it on its head. This is the inverted reality, the inverted moral landscape. This is where we are. So we are permanently residing in the inverted moral landscape, and we're intended to believe Elliot Page and the ridiculous Helen of Troy and Travis Scott. I mean, it's just like, it is unbelievable. So if you want to insult my intellectual fortitude, as I said before, then, I will not participate. And if I do, I'm going to get something out of it that will not achieve the demoralizing nature in which they hope to obviously achieve with the end result and just effective reaction, influential reaction that they evoke out of the film itself. So yeah, I don't know. That was 41 minutes on something that I didn't really even plan on discussing that much, but hey, it's worthwhile, and I think, especially knowing the relevant nature of this film at this point, I mean, my God, it's all anyone's really talking about, and I can't stomach seeing one more person that I know and I'm trying to remain respectful toward coming out with some ridiculous, a positive promotional take on how they appreciated this film. But I will say once again, I will remain open-minded, and I will watch this film in its entirety and come back with a full critique. But man, that's just you're trying to ruin, again, one of the most valuable literary reference points in all of human history. And yeah, I for one do not support that. But anyway, I saw the homies from the Fight Back podcast, my boy Jake, and I saw basically they posted something about, it was called Operation Earnest Voice. And this is basically, it's a major psychological operation, right, that was used to create sock puppet accounts to spread propaganda on social media. And you even have former CENTCOM Commander General Petraeus specifically saying they used the program to amplify, quote, moderate voices. And this is what the Fight Back podcast account posted a couple days ago, which I never actually heard of Operation Earnest Voice. But my God, that just like perfectly, reinforces so much of what we already believe in terms of and know for a fact in terms of the influencer industrial complex. And so, yeah, General Petraeus, exactly. And so Operation Earnest Voice, if you look this up, just even the official narrative of what this operation is a psychological operation by the United States Central Command, CENTCOM, that uses sock puppets to spread pro-American propaganda on targeted social networking services based outside of the United States, is what they claim. Now, in what world could you actually imagine and believe that this only was isolated and only applied to a foreign operation, of influence operation of some kind? That's just absolutely ridiculous. I just think that's naive and it's childish to imagine that to be the case. But now, what they call Operation Earnest Voice, OEV, it's first used in Iraq against forums used by Al-Qaeda members and insurgents. Oh, okay, so interesting, because obviously we created Al-Qaeda, so, why would they only be utilizing Operation Earnest Voice against forums used by Al-Qaeda members? But hey, who am I to say? So anyway, the point being is that main characteristics of the software, and this is stated in the software development request, basically 50 user operator licenses, 10 sock puppets controllable by each user. Sock puppets are to be replete with background history, supporting details, and cyber presences that are technically, culturally, and geographically consistent. Sock puppets are to be able to appear to originate in nearly any part of the world. A special secure VPN allowing sock puppets to appear to be posting from randomly selected IP addresses in order to, quote, hide the existence of the operation. 50 static IP addresses to enable government agencies to, quote, manage their persistent online personas with identities of government and enterprise organizations protected, which will allow for different state agents to use the same sock puppet and easily switch between different sock puppets to, quote, look like ordinary users as opposed to one organization. 9 private servers based on the geographic area of operations the customer is operating within, and which allow a customer's online personas to appear to originate from. These servers should use commercial hosting centers around the world. virtual machine environments, of course, deleted after each session termination to avoid interaction with, quote, any virus, worm, or malicious software. And then the last notable point is the fact that CENTCOM Commander David Petraeus, in his congressional testimony, stated that Operation Earnest Voice would reach a country's regional audiences through traditional media, as well as via websites and regional public affairs blogging, as an effort to, quote, counter extremist ideology and propaganda. Jim Mattis, his successor, altered the program to have regional blogging fall under general CENTCOM public affairs activity. On how they would operate on these blogs, Petraeus said, "We bring out the moderate voices, we amplify those, and in more detail, we detect and we flag if there's adversary, hostile, corrosive content in some open source web forum, and we engage with the web administrators to show that this violates website provider policies." So, all the world's a stage, and the digital gulags have already been developed and constructed around us. One nation under mind control, my friends. That is legitimately how I feel. And honestly, so before I just go on random tangents for the rest of the show, I really did want to discuss Hunter S. Thompson, very much so. And I think just again, and I saw this fascinating, it's very encouraging to see, so many people rising up and opposing this mass surveillance system and the flock technology, obviously, and this kind of gaining a lot of momentum in regard to an attempted, again, countering opposition, actually attempting to at the very least stave off the impending totalitarian technocratic state. And I saw somebody went on Tucker Carlson, this guy, I think his name was Ben Jordan, and he was discussing with him, and I don't watch Tucker's show, I just saw this as a clip, and basically it was Ben Jordan who was on Tucker's show, and he was discussing how it was discovered that Flock employees had requested access to video feeds of children at a daycare center over 1,000 times. All of these were grown men, and none were fired as far as the Flock employees. So I wonder, understanding the finders and how they infiltrated babysitting services and child care organizations and provided themselves with, not only infiltrated, but providing themselves with viable avenues and windows of opportunity into procuring children for an unfortunate traumatic operation of some kind that would only destroy, just again, it's like this is the most sinister nature and sadistic level of covert and clandestine operations. But this, Flock is effectively, this is how they kind of utilize the private sector for plausible deniability, is always the case. And the Finders cult, obviously, they had documents and files on so many different families and that they had accumulated to see, just even track their movements, know when the children would be vulnerable to abduction, things of that nature. And so the idea that these mass surveillance Flock cameras, and you have these, over 1,000 times you have employees that are all grown men employees requesting access to video feeds of children at daycare center. I just find that strange. Now, who knows what the alleged purpose is, why they would attempt to gain access to those video feeds, but nothing but concerning in my opinion. And especially, I on whatever this is, not too long ago, I remember I found some crazy connection to the Epstein files I was going back through, and I discovered this weird, basically document that you had almost what seemed to be like directed energy weapons of some kind that would plausibly drive a person to commit suicide, right? And I thought, interesting, that this would be common practice, utilizing directed energy weapons in the network. But this was all in regard to the Ashley Madison. This is so crazy. This was I'll show the document here in a moment. But if you remember, in 2015, there was a major scandal with Ashley Madison, and basically this it began. And if you remember, this is Ashley Madison was obviously basically it was a dating service, right? And in reality, I think it was far more than that. And just like kind of, even when I found out recently that Jared Fogel's nonprofit foundation was very much, in my opinion, involved in systematically producing and distributing child pornography, much more than being an isolated case of three, lone pedophile perpetrators acting alone, right? It's like, no, I don't actually see that as being plausible or believable enough. But either way, so you have this 2015 scandal involving this company where this hacker group known as the Impact Team breached the infidelity dating site servers in July 2015 and stole data on approximately 37 million users. After the site's parent company, Avid Life Media, refused demands to shut down, the hackers then released over 60 gigabytes of this sensitive information that included names, addresses, credit card details, private messages. And that all happened in like August of 2015. So the breach basically exposed security failures and use of essentially retention of user data, despite basically the weak retention of user data despite paid, quote, full delete services, which this is where there was a viable opportunity for a class action settlement, which I believe inevitably resulted with like over $11 million. And so the scandal also forced the CEO to resign, right? At the time, I think the name was Noel Bitterman, I'm not sure, whose their emails were leaked as well, and also revealed that he had sought escorts, right? Noel Bitterman, and basically, there were all these blackmail attempts and things of that nature, and reported suicides among the users of the service, of the dating service, because it was exposed that all these people were like married men were procuring, escorts. It was basically an escort service. So, and that is what you come to find is that so basically Ashley Madison was regarded at one point in time as a potential sex trafficking network. And so the Impact Team even alleged, and this was the hacking group that hacked the servers in 2015. So they claimed that a sister site, and they made this public statement, but they claimed that Ashley Madison had a sister site called Established Men. And the allegations from the Impact Team hacking group claimed that the Established Men sister site facilitated prostitution and human trafficking. So this was all a part of the Impact Team's manifesto, which basically demanded both the sites were taken down, and that they were also, I believe, there were a few other, basically demands that were made, but specifically the allegations of the Impact Team targeted this establishment sister site and described it as a, quote, prostitution human trafficking website for rich men to pay for sex. And then also it condemned in the manifesto Ashley Madison for enabling the infidelity. So this is post-breach, and you have all these reports confirming that Ashley Madison utilized fake female profiles and bots to deceive male users, with one analysis suggesting only about 1% of female accounts were active, but did not. So this just goes to show, be very careful of what you think is real with your engaging online, especially with a dating service. I mean, my God, I can't imagine what it's like in the environment of online dating at this point in time. But it has to be extraordinarily demoralizing. Anyway, find yourself someone worthwhile that you can trust. That should be the goal. So there's I thought that was fascinating in context to this Epstein document that I discovered. So let's check this out for a brief moment, and then we'll talk a little bit of Hunter S. Thompson and the Esalen Institute. Yeah, women are feds, especially online ones. Yeah, everything is fake and gay. I'll tell you that right now. But so yeah, this is fascinating stuff, and it's basically it's from Epstein Files data set 9. All right, so it's EFTA 000800475. And this is basically the Ashley Madison sex trafficking network with hundreds of what are called transmitter apartments and significant real estate used to house people with radio frequency transmitters to use on behalf of the network. So that is legitimately allegations made within this document. So this is obviously addressed to the Honorable Judge Geoffrey Berman. And so this is according to United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York, which we all know, glows like the sun, right? Like, just the Southern District of New York is where they send all of the most prominent cases they would like to be given the golden cover-up treatment, which it always receives and is facilitated in terms of the cover-up in a very effective way. But so this isn't a very long document, but it's worthwhile in actually reading. And again, significantly redacted, as always, which shouldn't surprise any of us. Thank you for the super chat, my friend. I appreciate you, brother. And that was from Chuck Bam 1. Yeah, so this is a fascinating document. It basically begins with a major redaction, but so major redaction and her husband, redacted, are leaders of a prostitution and child molesting and sex trafficking syndicate known as the Ashley Madison Network. A large majority of the funding for said network is held in the accounts of capital investors and property they have acquired. Much of the property is used to house people with radio transmitters. These transmitters send a signal of RF, radio frequency, audio, and video that are used to make people receive the signal in a way that interferes with their central nervous system. These transmitter people use extensive conditioning techniques to make people experience tactile, auditory, and visual hallucinations. It is used extensively to molest children. These transmitters, honestly, internalize what was just said. These transmitter people use extensive conditioning techniques to make people experience tactile, auditory, and visual hallucinations. It is used extensively to molest children. These transmitters often are readily visible from the street as a satellite dishes between the radio signal that is recorded of a person near a transceiver and the conditioning. People who hear the transmission begin to experience sensations similar to the person who made the recording. This ham radio technique makes it seem as though people are hearing voices and feeling these other hallucinations that often resemble sexual interactions with other people. This technology is what was used to communicate to and harass Jeffrey Epstein while in prison. Now, this is where we have to essentially believe that Epstein potentially did kill himself, or at least was, I think, conditioned to allow his murder. Who knows, right? It's difficult. But the point being is that is almost that's almost the starting point with this concept, is that he actually did die, obviously, and that he potentially was conditioned, and by utilizing RF frequency systems, even potentially causing him to kill himself, which is fascinating. And I don't really believe that part of it. But this technology is what was used to communicate to and harass Jeffrey Epstein while in prison. Driving people to commit suicide is a common practice with these transmitters. I mean, come on. Driving people to commit suicide is a common practice with these transmitters. They also frequently attempt to replicate break-ins and home invasions. Now that makes so much sense for people who have blown the whistle, whistleblowers, just individuals who have too much overexposure and fundamental details and evidence that could expose an overarching network. This is how it could be achieved, right? You could easily just have them almost completely have a psychological break. If you could legitimately post up outside their home and cause them to begin to question their sanity. It's just, my God, man, like what are they capable of, right? My brother, John Black, the Underclass is here, forced stream of consciousness. I love you, brother. But yeah, so that to me is just an extraordinary concept that, so they also frequently attempt to replicate these break-ins and home invasions. For some reason, people who have them meddle in the lives of others and attempt to cause as much harm as possible. Capital firms and private capital corporations hold most of the funds that are used by the system. Redacted has been involved for many years. He allegedly approves the lending of capital he knows should not be approved from Redacted, and he has directed other employees to participate in fraudulent transfers that facilitate the illicit movement of capital. The entire Redacted family is involved. Redacted has been molesting children using the radio and using the associated network of child molesters for decades. Why the fuck are people not reading this document? Like, honestly, it's when I found it not too long ago, just, I don't know, it was a few weeks ago when I talked about it on Whatever This Is. It just was something that like I said, it resonated with me because this feels all too plausible. This is a reality that I could imagine existing. And again, these are allegations. Who knows if they're unsubstantiated? I mean, are they unsubstantiated? I guess. But, the fact that it's even a legitimate document in the files and on the DOJ website to this day should give you pause, but clearly they redacted it to such an extent that we don't have any legitimate, isolated perpetrators we can point directly to other than the Ashley Madison sex trafficking network at large that they're referring to here. But why on earth would they feel the need to redact allegations such as this? The entire Redacted family is involved. Redacted has been molesting children using the radio and using the associated network of child molesters for decades. Almost all of the family's wealth is derived from this network. They have recently amassed tens of millions of dollars of real estate in recent months from transactions with other beneficiaries. Their children, redacted, are also involved. So there you go again. You have another blatant and overt example of the permanent establishment utilizing their own children for the most sinister sexual proclivities and abuse and traumatic. It's trauma-based mind control, I would imagine. But this is why I believe there are so many more fertility rituals and breeding experiments conducted, unbeknownst to the vast majority than we would ever want to imagine, being the case. And so, of course, their children are involved. They were probably bred for the very reason, for that purpose, which, not saying that's exactly how it always manifests, but it has at many different times in the past that I've unfortunately, been introduced to those evidentiary avenues. But so here we are again. Redacted used to live in the transmitter apartment next door to mine. I saw her in it having a meeting with Redacted, the owner, and other and other people involved in the redacted group of the National Ashley Madison Sex Trafficking Network. The redacted family coordinated groups from all over the country to converge in New York City over the last 2 years. I saw Redacted's husband, Redacted, entering that apartment in August 2019, even though he is not now, nor has he ever been the tenant. I also saw Redacted and her paramour, Redacted, which you can kind of see the bottom of the letters, enter the same apartment when Redacted, aka Redacted, was the tenant in 2018. Eric and his brother, Redacted, are transmitter people, and that apartment is used for transmitting and for prostitution. So Eric is a name, at least we sloppily were provided. Eric and his brother Redacted are transmitter people, and that apartment is used for transmitting and for prostitution. The current resident, Redacted, also transmits from that apartment. The neighbor across the hall, Redacted, also transmits from his apartment. The owner of that apartment also has knowledge of the situation and transmits from his other apartment. There are hundreds of apartments involved. The original transmitter apartment in this building is apartment 8A. It is ostensibly owned by a man named, beginning with the letter R, the rest entirely redacted. Redacted father acquired the apartment when his son was a teenager, after his son's participation in the underage prostitution organization. So, father acquired the apartment when his son was a teenager after his son's participation in the underage prostitution organization. I mean, my God. The company that owned the apartment, Redacted, had prostitutes and their relatives sign for apartments under the auspices of acting as a corporate representative. However, over time, they treated the apartment as though they were owned by the individuals. These apartments were often accumulated and transacted with by the recipients. Over time, they accumulated a huge amount of real estate and cash. Some of the proceeds are offshore. See the Panama Papers. There is a huge amount of real estate that is allegedly owned by this company that is in the hands of other people and companies. Apartment 7A has been owned by Redacted since he was 17 years old. The penthouse apartments are both involved. There are transmitter people in almost every apartment in the building. Also, on the 4th floor, there's a computer containing an immense child pornography library. It is the same material that Jeffrey Epstein kept and used as compromat. Do you hear this? Hundreds of apartments utilizing these transmitter apartments. On the 4th floor, there is a computer containing an immense child pornography library. It is the same material that Jeffrey Epstein kept and used as compromat. Many of the wealthy and well-known people that were personal associates of the late Jeffrey Epstein are still involved in the organization. Many of the most problematic are wealthy, aristocratic art patrons. It's just like, it's significantly redacted at the end, but at one point they say son of, and manages a major portion of the funding at Deutsche Bank. So boom, that's the end of this document. And again, for anyone, who wants to reference this in the future or go look at it for yourself, it's on the DOJ website still in the Epstein Files Dataset 9. I believe it was EFTA 00080475. So that's the actual document. If you want to look it up right now, or again in the near future, just to peruse it for yourself, but also maybe just potentially present to others, because how many people are unaware of this, and it really shouldn't surprise us. I mean, I think the Epstein files are an untapped kind of unending, never-ending resource that we can consistently point back to as much as they're still made available, which obviously is a huge, major problem. But okay, so now we will pivot to what I really wanted to discuss this entire time, and that is basically to reintroduce Hunter S. Thompson and the snuff film allegations briefly with added context, but then also to transition to Hunter's connection to the Esalen Institute, which will inevitably and ultimately lead us to Aldous Huxley and the human potential movement that formed, and also the origin of MK Ultra and the occult. And so this is all, I think, fundamentally involved in this overlapping influence operation that would very much undermine the just all of modern culture in the West, right? And again, it's a self-defeating culture that they would hope for us to embrace with this these new age ideological concepts built in, right, baked into it. And so, yeah, when are we getting the other Epstein tranche? Good question. So, yeah, I wouldn't hold my breath. I will say that. So, obviously, we all know that the CIA gave Hollywood a makeover following, basically following the Cold War and the reaction to it in many ways. And I think that this was very much, I believe it was Chase Brandon was the veteran CIA operative who was set up in the official entertainment liaison office in Hollywood for the CIA. And he subtly set all of this up and headed the liaison office and was the head of this liaison office by 1996. So it's fascinating to realize that this is the same person who happened to also be the first cousin of Hollywood movie star Tommy Lee Jones, right? So you wonder why Tommy Lee Jones, who was a fundamental star in the Men in Black, right? The Men in Black would have a cousin, the first cousin, set up a CIA liaison office in 1996 to Hollywood, who was a veteran in psychological operations. So tell me, why on earth? And this is apparently, Brandon was a career agent, spent 25 years in the agency's elite clandestine service as an undercover covert operations officer, carrying out foreign assignments involving international terrorism, counterinsurgency, global narcotics trafficking, and weapons smuggling. He was also an agency foreign political affairs analyst, presidential briefer, and an instructor in tactics. Dude, this is just fascinating because basically you have paramilitary, it's really propaganda paramilitary service is what was formed. And so he was an expert in espionage, tradecraft, and essentially even was, I believe, trained in many of these disciplines at a CIA training camp, of course. And this is when he would inevitably ultimately become, this is Chase Brandon again, picked to head the Hollywood office because of his experience in psychological operations. So, and I'm sure due to his strange connections to a very well-known prominent movie star by the name of Tommy Lee Jones. So should any of this be chalked up to coincidence or convenience or circumstance? It's just absolutely ridiculous to imagine. And so I just figured I should briefly remind everyone of that reality, unfortunately. And then now, whenever we were discussing, basically whenever we were discussing Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas on Already Dead not too long ago, and I pulled up the clip, right, of and I believe it was Beans was the patron who actually mentioned the fascinating quote that I think is very important for everyone to be aware of in terms of Hunter S. Thompson writing, basically in a way acknowledging the fact that I believe the quotation was, it was through, and because I discovered really these allegations going through Paul Bonacci and his testimony, and obviously he's a primary Franklin victim and was unfortunately endured trauma-based mind control from at least as early as 3 years old. Developed his primary alternate personality by the name of Wes Lee, I believe. At I believe by 7, as early as 7, maybe before then. But Paul Bonacci testified in court that he helped kidnap Johnny Gosch, and obviously he helped chloroform him, put him in the back of a van. And Johnny Gosch is one of the most prominent paper boys that was one of the first abducted children to ever be placed on the back of a milk carton. And unfortunately, it was so basically Paul Bonacci claims he was forced to participate in these snuff films and brutal orgies and things of that nature, and also in drug distribution. He would very much go on the record making those statements. We've had many different conversations kind of laying out the details of who Paul Bonacci really was. But the point being is that basically he claimed that he was forced to have participated in an orgy at Bohemian Grove where a young child was murdered. And Bonacci claimed the killing was filmed by a man named Hunter Thompson, who had joined their private jet flight to the West Coast in Vegas. Now, Rusty Nelson, the blackmail photographer from the Franklin scandal, he would basically claim that, and it was video evidence of this as well, was as far as the allegations. Inside the Franklin operation, basically he believed that Hunter S. Thompson was a loose end and that he was intended to be dealt with. So, one second. So Thompson, the quote that Beans, one of the patrons, actually introduced us to was basically the first page of Eye of the Chicken Hawk by Simon Dovey. So I was kind of kicking myself when I realized that for some reason I was just so eager to start that book when I first read it that I just kind of went to the first page. and I didn't recall, at the very least, I didn't recall ever reading that at the beginning of the Eye of the Chicken Hawk, but it is effectively in there as well. And I thought, strange, but relevant. And so Hunter S. Thompson basically writes that the autumn months are never a calm time in America. There's always a rash of kidnappings and abductions of school children in the football months. Preteens of both sexes are traditionally seized and grabbed off the streets by gangs of organized perverts who traditionally give them as Christmas gifts to each other to be personal sex slaves and playthings. So, too much knowledge. That feels like an all too aware initiate who has, at the very least, been aware, if not participated directly, in actions such as this. Despicable, degenerate action such as this. So now what's interesting to me is that John DeCamp would basically in the Franklin cover-up, he would write that Paul Bonacci, while at Bohemian Grove, would basically reinforcing the claim that Paul had made, where he and another boy were forced to perform sex acts and also even consume body parts of a child who they had watched being murdered and in a blood ritual ceremony by men in hooded robes. And basically the body was disposed of by these men as well. And so DeCamp reported that Bonacci claimed a snuff film had been made during throughout the course of this event. So the man who allegedly filmed the snuff film, right, at this Bohemian Grove ceremony, ritualistic blood sacrifice, had been picked up in Las Vegas on a private flight and was identified as Hunter Thompson. So then you have basically, I was reading through Russ Winter has a good article on Winter Watch that I archived as well, just to be safe, about some of these allegations in regard to Hunter as well. And I thought it was interesting because I saw one part where Hunter S. Thompson's secretary, Nicole Brown, this is very interesting because in 1990, Thompson was basically slapped with a sexual assault and weapons charges and drug charges and things of that nature that were inevitably dropped, these charges. But in 2003, he shot and wounded his assistant and also his neighbor on his property. So this was ultimately considered to be an accident, right? And he was he was apparently shooting at a bear. But in 1985, he even shot up the house of a neighbor that he was feuding with. So this is like a long-standing kind of pattern with Hunter. But here's the interesting part is that Hunter Thompson's secretary, Nicole Brown, she wrote that he kicked her out of the house for refusing to watch a snuff film. She said for weeks he played a tape recording of a jackrabbit screaming in a trap, which instantly, when I told Jose about this the other day, and I had the same exact thought, it just reminded me instantly of Waco, right? And how the psychological warfare that they were utilizing against the Branch Davidians, at least during the siege. And they did something very similar, right? In terms of these dying rabbits and animals being mutilated. So, and apparently Hunter was very abusive to his pets and other animals as well. And he essentially would attempt to, like, this is what I read directly from the allegations. Other times I witnessed, so it says, despite the rumors that followed me home when I left, he never held a gun to my head or laid a finger on me. But that's not to say he didn't throw a tantrum or two. Paranoid, he would lock everyone out of his cabin for hours at a time, intermittently setting off his alarm and firing guns into the air. One time I watched him beat his car because his cigarettes were locked inside, and another time he threw me out of the house for refusing to watch a snuff film. And he was hell on his new kitten, Hugo, especially when he felt I was paying it too much attention. He would snatch Hugo up, smudge his pink nose in cocaine, and send him darting across the kitchen floor. If I would get up from our work to shut the front door to keep the cat from fleeing outside, he would berate me with a round of screaming, furiously yelling at the top of his lungs. That would have addled me if not from my own experience in a fit-throwing family. So that's just an aside allegation, obviously, that kind of illustrates who Hunter really was. And the fact anyone who could treat a household pet like that in that sort of way is an absolute psychopath, in my opinion. And it wouldn't take too much for me to believe or imagine a world where obviously Hunter was taking things much further than that, right? And so this is where you have basically these videos being scrubbed from the internet that would help substantiate some of these claims as far as just Hunter kind of. There was one point on the Letterman show where essentially you have just Hunter just basically going on the record claiming that he loves to kill, right? And I watched that, and it's just a strange way in which he describes it. But also, Rusty Nelson, there was an actual video. There was video evidence of the blackmail photographer Rusty Nelson from the Franklin scandal, who goes on the record claiming that Hunter Thompson offered him directly $100,000 to shoot a snuff film. So if that is, again, this is a blackmail photographer, a part of a network. I believe it was Nick Bryant. I think we discussed it briefly whenever we brought it up a couple weeks ago on Already Dead, but Nick Bryant went on the record kind of, remaining skeptical in regard to these specific claims coming from Rusty and also even from Bonacci in a way, because it wasn't as if he was questioning the fact that Paul was being untruthful by design, but it was almost as if he wasn't quite certain who Hunter Thompson even was, other than this Hunter Thompson that he had met privately in this context of filming a snuff film. So whether that gives you pause or not on the credibility of these allegations, worthwhile in at least knowing. Now, here's where we kind of have, and I guess let me replay this deleted scene because, and who knows, it might have been in the director's cut. I don't think so, because I have the Criterion collection of the Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas Terry Gilliam film. And I never found this in the deleted scenes or in the extended, scenes or any of the scenes that were actually provided in the Criterion collection of like deleted footage. But either way, this is fascinating and will provide us context moving forward. We'll finally get into Hunter S. Thompson's relationship to the Esalen Institute and what was called Fear and Loathing in Big Sur, right? Which is kind of funny to me because obviously Big Sur is directly where the Esalen was set up in a real way. But give me 1 second. I'm trying to pull up the actual clip. I might have to pull it up here in a moment. I have it in, oh, here we go. Boom. All right. So this will, at the very least, I isolated it finally, so it's not exactly the same as in terms of the video we watched originally, but it's at the very least, it's not the Instagram post anymore.
Hey, rum and ice? You know, when I'm California boy, still.
My buddy here just telling me all about stuff that was down there.
Oh, Christ, they're everywhere. What do you say? Sure as hell down the south. They like that warm weather. Yeah. Now it's out of control. First it was drugs. Now it's witchcraft.
Witchcraft.
Big inspectors, man. Trust me, you don't know real troubles you have to face down a bunch of these addicts gone crazy for human sacrifice.
Human sacrifice. A bunch of science fiction stuff, man.
Not where we operate.
Reality is Malibu alone is goddamn safe for worshippers kill 6 great people every day. Don't take people right off the street. You have to. All they want is blood.
No, just the other day we had a case where they grabbed a little girl right out of McDonald's hamburger stand. The waitress, about 16 years old. A lot of people watching.
What happened? What'd they do to her? Do?
Jesus Christ. Chopped her goddamn head up right there in the parking lot. Cut all kinds of holes in her. Sucked out the blood, man.
Let me get this straight. You're telling me they pull a little girl out of the McDonald's hamburger stand, take her out in the parking lot, all these people standing there, cut her head off, suck the blood out. Nobody does a goddamn thing.
Well, good they do. The guy that took the hell was about 6'7", 300 pounds, packing Rugers and M16.
Just ran back out into Death Valley, same place where Manson turned out.
Like big lizards.
Every one of them started naked.
Hey, no, naked.
Naked.
They're all veterans.
They're all veterans. That's so crazy to me.
Yeah, I think that used to be a major in the Marines.
Major.
We know where he lives. Can't near the house.
Oh, Major.
He wanted to pee in behind him, you know. That's how he got so big. I mean, he quit the Marines and just broke up.
Usually it's whole families. During the night, some of them wake up until they feel their heads going and then shit away. Happens every day. 3 more rums, plenty of ice, and maybe a handful of lime chunk.
You guys with that police convention upstairs?
You sure are, ma'am.
That's so. I never heard that kind of talk in this bar before. Jesus Christ, how do you guys stand that kind of work?
I like it. It's groovy.
Yeah, what's wrong with you? Somebody's got to do it.
God damn it, I hate you.
So obviously, you see exactly why I felt it necessary to actually play this, right? because again, to me, this was, as Uncle Ted said in the chat here, this was the movie that made drugs cool for my generation. It was sort of what I was alluding to in a way, in terms of, hold on, let me see, the mustache 3, the one mustache 3 in the chat says, I could be wrong, but Mad Men, the TV show, ends with Donald Draper going to the Esalen Institute or a place representing it. Check it out one day. Man, I will have to, honestly. That sounds, it sounds exactly what, just in terms of, it's very believable. It makes a lot of sense that would come up, and especially in Mad Men, because if you think about product placements and exactly what the entire series is really about, it's about subtly influencing and propagandizing and manipulating the minds of the general public to really to basically engage in this material consumerism that demoralizes you and disrupts the divine path. It basically undermines the value of your soul. This is the inevitable spiritual trap. And I think that it's just like, it makes all the sense in the world that would obviously play a role and become a factor in that film or that series plot. But yeah, in regard to the Esalen Institute specifically, you basically have Hunter S. Thompson serving as a security guard and caretaker for what was the Big Sur Hot Springs property in 1961. And this tenure, obviously, we're meant to believe, ironically and conveniently preceded and helped facilitate the founding of the Esalen Institute, all coincidentally, of course. So Thompson was hired by the Murphy family. We'll get into this in a moment, to manage the estate directly. And this, it was owned by his friend Dennis Murphy and his brother Michael Murphy. And these people play a very influential role as well. Thompson was evicted after, I believe, around 8 months due to what was deemed erratic behavior, including firing a pistol at guests and writing a scandalous article about the baths for Rogue magazine. And his presence, again, coincidentally coincided with the early planning stages of the Institute. Michael Murphy and Dick Price used the same property to launch the Esalen Institute in 1962, the very following year. Thompson's chaotic departure and the subsequent transformation of the site from a struggling hot springs resort into a center for human potential exploration mark a unique historical intersection between the gonzo journalism pioneer and the human potential movement. Now, it was in 1960, I believe, when Hunter moved to San Juan, Puerto Rico, right? So you see, he took a job, right, for like a sports magazine. This is after he got out of the military, because obviously he was in the military for a brief time, and he was even transferred at one point to Eglin Air Force Base, and that was in Florida, I believe. And and I believe he even was taking night classes or something at Florida State. But the point is that he received his basic training in Texas, San Antonio, I think, is in Lackland, the Lackland Air Force Base. And then I think he even transferred at one point to Illinois to another Air Force base. But either way, it would ultimately result in a discharge, I believe, and not very surprising. It was an honorable discharge, and I think the commanding officer even provided a summary that this airman, although talented, will not be guided by policy, which I thought was kind of funny. And basically, sometimes his rebel and superior attitude seems to rub off on other airmen staff members. Now, it was in 1960 when he, as I said, he moved to Puerto Rico to take a job with a sports magazine, which apparently didn't last very long, and the publication would go under. But he then would apply for this English language daily news publication in Puerto Rico. And I believe the managing editor would become a novelist later on in the future, and essentially would be I think it was William Kennedy was the name of the individual who would become, I believe, his publisher at that time. But either way, he worked for, basically he became friends with this William Kennedy figure for quite some time, and he worked for like the New York Herald Tribune and a few other publications that were basically, I think Kennedy was his editor as well. William Kennedy, I believe, was his name. But anyway, the point is that he returns to the U.S. and he decides to hitchhike across the United States along U.S. Highway 40. This is when he would ultimately end up in Big Sur, California, working as a security guard and caretaker at the Big Sur Hot Springs for this alleged 8-month period in 1961, just before it becomes the Esalen Institute. So while he's there is when he publishes his first magazine feature in Rogue magazine, which again I think led to him being fired as the caretaker from the Big Sur property. That's how the story goes, at least. And it was really about this bohemian culture in Big Sur that was being cultivated at the time, especially in terms of psychedelics, which were becoming, common, very much commonplace, especially in 1962. But Thompson would basically, I think this is during the time he would write the Rum Diary and a few others, like even Prince Jellyfish, I think, as well. And yeah, I think so. This is where I discovered an article. It's called, I think it was called From Alta Online or something, but it's written by John Markoff from 2018. It was originally published, and it's called Fear and Loathing in Big Sur. And it begins with a question: who would hire Hunter S. Thompson to take care of a rustic Big Sur coastal estate? That ill-advised decision led directly to the founding of the famed Esalen Retreat. So let's take a look at this article, because I think it's worthwhile in actually presenting to you guys. So, awesome gonzo art as always. And now this isn't exactly by Ralph Steadman, but it's an attempt at gonzo art, which I will say will forever be probably my favorite form of just, it's something that still resonates with me as much as I think Ralph Steadman's work is fascinating. I was going back through some of his earlier collection and his current collection, and man, it's incredible work. But anyway, so we won't read much of this, but we'll just read the portion that I think applies and is very interesting and important to this conversation. And that is basically, it begins by describing legendary gonzo journalist Hunter S. Thompson, known for many things: a propensity for absorbing illegal substances, a love of guns, hanging out with the Hells Angels, and ultimately having his ashes blasted towards space in a rocket, which I believe was a New Age occult ritual. Who would hire someone like that to be the caretaker of an oceanfront estate in Big Sur? Therein lies a tale worthy of Thompson's beloved new journalism. The property that Thompson oversaw in the early 1960s eventually became the Esalen Institute, the legendary retreat that is associated with a mellow vibe and was the birthplace of the human potential movement, pulling together many of the threads that formed the 1960s counterculture. The summer-fall program for the New Age Retreat Center came to include such luminaries as Ken Kesey, Fritz Perls, and Alan Watts. But Esalen might never have even been founded if not for Thompson. In 1961, Thompson trekked to the rugged Big Sur coastline on a quest to write his second novel, or as he referred to it in a letter to Norman Mailer, the great Puerto Rican novel, in part by channeling California writers such as Henry Miller and Dennis Murphy, who was a young writer and had published a well-received first novel called The Sergeant. Dennis Murphy, obviously, member of the family who owned this estate that would become the Esalen Institute. And again, this is the Alta Online Journal, I believe, is the original publication if you do want to pull this article at some point in the future for reference. Now, as it happens, Murphy's grandmother owned a ramshackle property in the heart of Big Sur, then known as Slate's Hot Springs. The family had acquired the land in 1910 with the intent of turning it into a European-style health spa, but the dream hadn't really materialized. This is the original lodge, which is fascinating to actually see a picture during that time. Shortly before Thompson's arrival, Dennis Murphy's older brother, Michael, returned to the U.S. from a pilgrimage to India. Attending Stanford in the mid-1950s, Murphy had fallen under the spell of Eastern philosophy. I believe we did. That's amazing. We introduced this entire episode with Hollywood land, with Hollywood, with this casting of the spell, right? The mind manipulation of the general public and the culture creation machinations and sophisticated methods. It's just like unintentional end around and reference callback, right? Either way. So Murphy had fallen under the spell of Eastern philosophy while studying with religious scholar Frederick Spiegelberg. In his travels to India, Murphy became deeply influenced by the followers of Sri Aurobindo, an Indian guru who had died in 1950. Murphy's friend and Stanford classmate Richard Price had been to a lecture of Aldous Huxley in 1960 at the University of California at San Francisco on human potentialities. Huxley made the argument that the human mind only used about 10% of its capacity and called on the doctors and medical researchers in the audience to develop technologies to exploit the complete power of all the human neurons. From these various influences, the two men created the Human Potential Movement, and Murphy and Price began assembling the elements that became Esalen, blending Eastern religion and philosophy with other New Age ideas. Murphy and Price wanted to use Slate Hot Springs as an Esalen retreat center. But when Murphy approached his grandmother, Vinnie Bunny McDonald Murphy, with a proposal to turn the family property into the home of his new creation, she would have none of it. She had taken to calling her grandson the Hindu and thought he was going to give the property to, quote, the Indians. So enter Hunter S. Thompson. Looking for an inexpensive place to live while writing his novel, the eccentric writer proposed that Bunny make him the caretaker for the property, which consisted of a motel and several houses and cabins adjacent to concrete-lined hot baths, all set beneath Highway 1 on the rocky edge of the Pacific. The area was occupied by a motley but interesting group of people. Author Henry Miller had been a neighbor on nearby Partington Road, helping the Beat generation to discover Big Sur. Beat poets Lou Welch and Lenore Kendall lived at the retreat for a while, and folk singer Joanne Baez, had a cabin in the woods above the coastline. As a college student at Stanford in the late 1950s, Stuart Brand, who would become one of Ken Kesey's merry pranksters and later created the Whole Earth catalog, happened to be a regular visitor. So we'll end with this, and transition to, obviously, just how this kind of reinforces the course of that we're charting through this concept and conversation. So basically, employing a caretaker for the property seemed a reasonable idea, is what they're claiming in this context. And as I see it, you may be better off having a reliable person living in the house, Thompson wrote Bunny Murphy in January 1961, because like other vacant buildings in Big Sur, it is very often invaded by transients, beatniks, and other types who have no respect for private property, furniture, or anything else. The Murphy family matriarch accepted Thompson's proposal. His rent would be a mere $15 a month, and he was given the responsibilities of both security guard and groundskeeper, along with a small set of rooms adjacent to the main house. Okay. So that really kind of at least charts the course, as I said before, toward introducing Aldous Huxley and his relationship to the Human Potential Movement, and how the original Esalen Institute sort of originated, right, in a way, and was founded in a way. And at the very least, where the concepts and philosophy came from. Now, briefly, I think it's important that obviously we're aware of the fact that I think it was between 1954 and 1959, where you have Timothy Leary basically working as the director of clinical research and psychology at the Kaiser Foundation Hospital in Oakland, California. So during that time is when he developed a personality test, which basically played a major role in screening CIA employees and operatives. So Leary's had a close relationship and friendship with a CIA operative in the early 50s by the name of Frank Barron. And basically Barron was instrumental in establishing the Berkeley Institute for Personality Assessment and Research, which was directly funded by the CIA. So interestingly, Aldous Huxley wrote again a sort of underappreciated, underacknowledged work known as The Devils of Loudun, right? Loudun, actually, The Devils of Loudun. And it basically was reporting on witchcraft incidents in 17th century France. And this is what seems to have been possession or psychological manipulation that would eerily resemble demonic possession. So Huxley, really knowing that he was personal friends with Aleister Crowley and these very, he has these new age contacts, right, where he's personal friends with individuals who would effectively found and construct these new age ideological frameworks and even organizations that would help perpetuate this again, the the covert, as I said before, the covert esoteric occult ideology permeating throughout modern society. These are the beacons of culture creation that help provide that cultural creation concept into its modern form. And so I see it was basically between, and again, it's like, consider the fact that, right, it was his time at Esalen where he founded Gonzo journalism, basically, right, which is kind of interesting. But between the early 1960s, I think it was 60 and 61, that basically you have, under this interesting CIA operative, right, by the name of Frank Barron, you have Timothy Leary at Harvard basically becoming directly involved in groundbreaking psychedelic research, is what you can call it. And he would ultimately, be he had an insane quote at one point where Timothy Leary basically directly acknowledges, and he's had many extraordinary quotes, but he essentially acknowledges the fact that it was the CIA and the government and the establishment in Washington, D.C., who had financially backed his own research and this specific research at Harvard. And he was claiming that it included figures such as Harry Murray, I believe, which was an OSS psychologist, Martin T. Orne from the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, which directly received CIA funding as well. And Timothy Leary at one point even said some powerful people in Washington sponsored all this drug research. And I just found that to be just a hilarious quote, as much as it should be revealing and expose everyone to the reality. Yeah, it doesn't seem like many people are aware of that fact. But this is where we find ourselves at the crossroads of, government, let's just say, clandestine intelligence interests, right, in the intelligence apparatus, and where they intersect with the new age occult psychedelic phenomena that was being very much administered into pop culture and into, just again, the culture in the West, right? And so Huxley is acting as a visiting professor at Harvard during this time, and he directly would even urge Timothy Leary to form a secretive group aimed at using LSD for positive societal change. So to have an individual, Aldous Huxley, proposing forming a secret society or a secret order to basically to push forward societal progress through utilizing psychedelics, it should go to show that this effort was almost primarily, I think, entrenched systematically in terms of how they could how they could effectively inject government-sanctioned mind control. That's what it is. And so positive societal change utilizing a mind control, basically a pharmaceutical agent is not how it's going to come to fruition in a positive way. In what world? It's just absolutely absurd. So now, before I forget, the Aldous Huxley work that I've mentioned a few times now, The Devils of Lodun, is absolutely insane. When I just kind of read the overview of the plot. So this is a 1952 nonfiction account by Aldous Huxley, expressed basically as a novel, and it recounts these events of Lodun possessions, demonic possessions of 1634. So, according to the official premise, it is a historical narrative of supposed demonic possession, religious fanaticism, sexual repression, and mass hysteria that occurred in 17th century France surrounding unexplained events that took place in the small town of Lodun. It centers on Roman Catholic priest Urbain Grandier and an entire convent of Ursuline nuns who allegedly became possessed by demons after Grandier made a pact with Satan. The events led to several public exorcisms as well as executions by burning. The book, though lesser known than Huxley's other books, is considered one of his best works, basically, is what the official narrative is. Now, Devils of Lodun, exactly. Urbain Grandier was a priest burned at the stake at Lodun, France on August 18th, 1634. He was accused of seducing an entire convent of Ursuline nuns and of being in league with the devil. Grandier was likely promiscuous and was insolent towards his peers. He had antagonized the Mother Superior, Sister Jeanne of the Angels, when he rejected her offer to become the spiritual advisor to the convent. He faced an ecclesiastical tribunal and was acquitted. It was only after he had publicly spoken against Cardinal Richelieu that a new trial was ordered by the cardinal. He was tortured, found guilty, and executed by being burnt alive, but never admitted guilt. Huxley touches on aspects of the multiple personality controversy and cases of apparent demonic possession within the book. So that is what instantly appealed to me and grabbed my attention, is that you have Huxley as early as 1952, when we know this is the origin of mind control, behavioral modification, experimentation within the intelligence apparatus at the time. This is when the sinister subproject that the CIA was attempting to, participate in and engage in terms of utilizing and procuring children to train them and condition them to become child prostitutes in a human honeypot operation for sexual blackmail. Now, that's just one example, but this is exactly the timing that fits so perfectly with the origins of MK Ultra in the West. So keep that in mind, because obviously this is where we find ourselves at the occult origins of MK Ultra. So the program originally initiated in 1952, that exact same year that The Devils of Lodun was written, and he's exploring multiple personality disorder and demonic possession and mind control in this book, which is fascinating stuff, especially knowing his former relationship attending the Tavistock Institute, basically, right, as one of the prominent figures. So basically you have, this is in 1952 when the program is being initiated. Basically you have the return of Aldous Huxley at the exact same time to the US. Huxley and a doctor named Humphrey Osmond played a prominent role in MK Ultra, and Huxley's interest in mind-altering substances was allegedly shaped by his fascination with psychologist William James. William James had a significant influence on Aldous Huxley's perception of the possibilities of mind alteration. The role of Tavistock. So the Tavistock Institute, along with the Scottish Rite Freemasons and other British, American, Canadian, and United Nations agencies and secret fraternal organizations of powerful influence, played a major crucial role in the development of MK Ultra. And this was all being established. So the Tavistock Institute was established in 1947. It specialized in behavior control research and psychological manipulation. The Institute basically collaborated with the CIA and other organizations and laid the foundation for MK Ultra's mind control experiments. Now, if you remember, whenever I covered the Tavistock Institute in my Committee of 300 episode, which is one of my all-time favorite episodes that I've ever done, honestly. It was really when I was introduced to basically, I wouldn't be surprised because it's the Templars, my friend, right? It's like that's the exact same time when he says Beefhammer 5802 in the chat says, wasn't Richelieu, or I'm sorry, I entirely butchered that, but part of the Three Musketeers story. Richelieu, yeah, I'm pretty sure, but it makes sense because again, it's like, what are the Musketeers? They're the Knights Templar, right? And it's just like, my God, this is all New Age occultism, and the Templar Renaissance, it was a real thing, you know, and it still applies to this very day as far as how it affects and influences modern society. Why do you think you have these figures in the current Trump administration, and they got tribute tattoos to the Knights Templar? Like, it's just, what are we doing, man? So, Tavistock Institute. So it basically was known as the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations, and according to the official narrative, was initially created, as I said, in 47 after the Rockefeller Foundation awarded a significant grant that facilitated the creation of the institute. Now, there's an alternative perspective where basically this group was formed at Oxford University in London by the Royal Institute of International Affairs in 1922. And that essentially there was a British Army technician by the name of Major John Rawlings Rees. And he was instructed to set up basically the largest brainwashing facility in the world at the Tavistock Institute for Human Relations as a part of Sussex University. So this all was becoming, and there's an amazing article directly regarding this at the Millennium Report, which I remember referencing in my Committee of 300 article, or episode, I'm sorry, whenever I did in the chapter where I covered Tavistock. So this became the core of Britain's Psychological Warfare Bureau. It was Tavistock design methods that got the United States into the Second World War, in which, under the guidance of Dr. Kurt Lewin, established the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, which was obviously the forerunner of the CIA. So Lewin became the director of the Strategic Bombing Survey, which was a plan for the Royal Air Force to basically concentrate on bombing German worker housing while leaving military targets such as munition plants alone. So again, showing the true ultimate scope of the strategic nature behind. This was a manufactured crisis, right? The World War II, they chose who would become the winner and the losers out of this paradigm shifting moment in human history, when you just view the conflict in itself as one being funded and financed by both sides, right? So it's like both sides are being financed by one organization, by one entity that is effectively pushing this conflict to its climax, and if only to restructure all of global society as a consequential result. I mean, anyway, don't get me started on the possibility of mind control and Tavistock being involved with Adolf Hitler's mind control behavioral modification experimentation in Devon, Ireland, because I honestly think it makes far more sense than anything else we're intended to believe in regard to the official narratives of the conflict at large. But either way, whenever you realize that they were strategically targeting German worker housing and not the military targets that they should have been, if they had a real goal in mind of achieving strategic victory, good luck. You know, that's not the reality. That isn't how the world works. Like, this isn't, it just is so much more complicated than black hats, white hats, on any given side of a conflict or a debate. It's just more complicated, and it's by design, because the goal is to have you bogged down in nonsensical debates where you can't even fundamentally acknowledge or isolate and understand the root causes of any of this destabilizing, of any of the destabilization that is being strategically utilized in regard to modern society. So this is the munition plants on both sides of the conflict belong to the international bankers who had no wish to see their assets destroyed. That's the bottom line. That's the facts of what actually occurred during World War II. And the idea behind saturation bombing of civilian worker housing was to break the morale of the German worker. It was demoralization tactics. It had nothing to do with the as far as the SS, right? Or the actual leadership hierarchy within the power paradigm of Nazi Germany at this time. I understand the concept of why you would want to demoralize the citizenry and in wartime. Look, I'm not saying me personally, but I'm saying yes, I did an episode on the Pilgrim Society and the Anglo-American establishment, and it's also one of my all-time favorite episodes that I've covered, if I'm being honest. But that's a whole nother different conversation. Although it is the exact same, at the same time, I think it perfectly does reinforce exactly the conversation we're having. But just to finish, charting this course through Tavistock and Esalen and this culture creation phenomena that legitimately has disrupted all of global society. That is the goal at this current moment. And honestly, when you begin to realize that Tavistock ran over 30 different research institutions throughout the U.S., played a prominent role in the formation of NATO, which was financed by the German Marshall Fund for at least 5 years. Tavistock also was suspected to be the culture creation arm for the Committee of 300, operating through many different think tanks and research institutes such as the RAND Corporation. Have you ever heard of the Delphi method? Appeal to authority, anyone? Okay, the Brookings Institute, the Institute for Policy Studies, the Stanford Research Institute, as well as being tasked with infiltrating the National Teachers Association in an effort to take full control of the system of education. This is it, baby. This is the octopus of global control. This is the long march through the institutions. Yeah, don't look me in the eyes, John. You kidding me? So Dr. Coleman, John Coleman, remember his book is fascinating and it's worth reading. Eustace Mullins as well. These are all just extraordinary works that people should be introduced to. But there was a claim that Coleman made in his book that he said one of Tavistock's chief wreckers of our way of life was Dr. Alexander King, a founding member of NATO, a favorite of the committee, and a leading member of the Club of Rome. King was assigned by the Club of Rome to lower the standard of American education by taking control of the National Teachers Association and working in close conjunction with certain members of the U.S. Congress. By 1993, the National Teachers Association had become a formidable socialist tool in the struggle for possession of the minds of our children. Outcome-based education, OBE, was the method whereby the wholesale socializing of American school children was being carried out, the long march through the institutions. Another aspect of OBE, outcome-based education, is its heavy attention to sex education and pumping lesbianism and homosexuality into the minds of grade school and secondary school children. Man, isn't that true? That is just, it's something that people need to be far more aware of, and this is, so before, because we could spend all day on the Committee of 300 and the power paradigm behind the scenes, the aristocratic, genealogical dynamic of power. But yeah, that's Jews with porn and trannies. Yeah, hey, look, man. You remember the Jaffe memo? It's so crazy. So in 1969 there was a memo called the Jaffe Memo, which falls perfectly in place with basically this specific brand of what amounts to a psychotic implementation of the pseudoscientific belief system of eugenics and transhumanism. That's just a reality. The Jaffe Memo is an infamous document produced by Planned Parenthood in 1969, and in a single page conveys the links that the elites are willing to go to, quote, manage the United States population. Most of the ideas listed in the memo seem to have one primary goal in mind. How can we reduce the population in the United States? I'll briefly list some of the suggestions found in the memo. Here's the most important. Compulsory abortion of out-of-wedlock pregnancies. Compulsory sterilization of all who have 2 children, except for a few who could be allowed 3. Fertility control agents in the water supply. Encouraged increased homosexuality. Compulsory education of children. Encourage women to work. Alter image of ideal family size. And postpone or avoid marriage. All of this is directly related to the socially engineered goals of the depopulation agenda pushed forward by the Club of Rome and its affiliate organizations. That's it. That's it. So if you wonder why this level of propaganda has been achieved, in terms of the outcome itself, and fundamentally convincing generations of human beings in the West into embracing the worst and most self-defeating ideology you could ever imagine. Now, Aldous Huxley, just to take it back for a moment, he had a fascination with mind-altering substances that stemmed from basically his admiration for this William James character that I mentioned before, who was a psychologist, right? And Aldous Huxley, basically, William James had advocated the study of intense religious experiences, right? Which he believed held valuable insights into the human mind. And Huxley's exploration of various drugs, including mescaline, which he was obviously introduced to by Aleister Crowley, documented in his semi-autobiographical work, which was called The Doors of Perception, which, as I mentioned before, led to the naming by Jim Morrison of the band The Doors. But The Doors of Perception basically was influenced by William James, the psychologist, and his teachings. So their shared interest in the possibilities of altered states of consciousness shaped Huxley's conception of the mind and its manipulation. So now, this is when Huxley's introduced to basically Aleister Crowley and some of these essentially psychedelics, right, that he would become enamored with. And even, I believe, on his deathbed, Aldous Huxley would demand basically a heroic dose of LSD, if I recall correctly, which had to have been, I mean, talk about an extraordinary death. But so, of course, it was under H.G. Wells that Huxley was introduced to Aleister Crowley. No way. Of course, it was H.G. Wells who would introduce Aldous Huxley to Aleister Crowley, and allegedly this led to ultimately a series of influential encounters between the two of them. Crowley allegedly is the one, as I mentioned before, reputed to have introduced Huxley to mescaline, and I think also a couple of other substances as well. But according to Crowley's confessions to his lover, Victor Newberg, he revealed that Hitler was a practicing occultist and that the OTO, a secret society Crowley belonged to, assisted the Nazis in gaining power, which I found interesting. Yeah, Fabian socialist. But again, Hitler's not this topic of discussion. But but it makes a lot of sense, right? And so also considering the connection between Crowley, Aldous Huxley, and Adolf Hitler. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, honestly, if you consider the concept. But either way, the occult, really, the occult origins of MK Ultra stem in the prevalence of occult beliefs among these key prominent figures involved directly in the MK Ultra behavioral modification experimentation, which obviously provides significant insight into the origins of the project. And so this combination, it basically combined occult practices influenced by figures like Aleister Crowley and Steiner with this advanced scientific knowledge that had been gained throughout right behavioral modification operation, and also through the draft of Operation Paperclip, right, which is important, and in many ways has been basically described as setting the stage for MK Ultra and the mind control experimentation that was carried out under the operation. So this is directly where we have the intersection between government interests laying the groundwork for a mind control program aimed at clearly what is the ultimate goal is obviously to gain control over the human mind in its entirety. And so keeping that at the forefront, right, in regard to, honestly, I might have to, I wish I had a secondary video that I could pull up just so I could get some coffee and go to the bathroom, and then I'm going to finish the show. So honestly, I'm going to replay that deleted scene from earlier. I'm sorry to have to do that to you guys, but give me 1 second and I will be right back. I should have prepared an additional video to show you, to give myself a reprieve for a brief moment. But upon my return, we will go ahead and close out and come to a conclusion in regard to all of these tangential connections and how they directly apply to the topic at hand. So give me 1 moment. I'll be right back, and I appreciate you all. I'm sorry for the recurring video.
Rolling ice? No, I'm in California, boys. Yeah. Buddy here's just telling me all about stuff that's down there. Oh, Christ, they're everywhere. What do you say? Sure as hell down in the south. They like that warm weather. Yeah. Now it's out of control. First it was drugs. Now it's witchcraft. Witchcraft? Yeah, witchcraft. Trust me, you don't know real trouble until you have to face down a bunch of these addicts gone crazy for human sacrifice. Human sacrifice? Science fiction stuff, man. How would we operate?
Reality is, Malibu alone is goddamn Satan worshippers kill 6 or 8 people every day. They'll take people out the street if they have to. All they want is fun.
No, just the other day we had a case where they grabbed a little girl right out of McDonald's hamburger stand. The waitress, 16 years old, a lot of people watching.
What happened? What'd they do to her?
Dude.
Jesus Christ. Chopped her goddamn head up right there in the parking lot. And cut all kinds of holes in everything. Sucked out the blood.
Let me get this straight. You're telling me they pull a little girl out of the McDonald's hamburger stand, take her out in the parking lot, all these people standing around, cut her head off, suck the blood out. Nobody does a goddamn thing.
Well, good they do. The guy that took the hell was about 6'7", 300 pounds, packing Lugers and M16.
They're back out of step now. See what place for man turned out.
Big lizard.
Every one of them started naked.
Naked?
No, naked.
Oh, better.
Better. Yeah, the big guy used to be a major in the Marines.
Major?
You know where he lives.
Oh, Major.
He wanted to pee him home, you know.
Really?
That's how he got so big, man. When he quit the Marines, he just broke out.
Usually it's all family. During the night, some people wake up until they feel their heads going and then shit today. I did every day. 3 more rounds.
All right, you guys get the point. Now, I think that just with that being obviously, I apologize once again for having to replay the video, but at the same time, it reminded me that there's actually an additional connection to. Basically, I went back through and I reread part. I was rereading Fear and Loathing, essentially the book itself. And as much as I love the film, and Terry Gilliam's one of my all-time favorite directors, and man, it's kind of just incredible. The like the Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus is one of my favorite films. It has Colin Farrell and and Heath Ledger. I believe it was Heath Ledger's last film. He actually died on set, or like died while he was filming that's a Terry Gilliam movie, The Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus, and it took I believe it was Jude Law, Johnny Depp, of course, and Colin Farrell as well, and they all basically played a version of Heath Ledger's character in that film. But it perfectly was. If anyone hasn't watched it, I urge you and encourage you to definitely go and appreciate it for what it is, because even the concept of the plot at the very end, you realize that this man has made a deal with the devil, and he sold his soul, and he was working for a nonprofit organization that was basically exploiting children, man. And my God, it's like, I remember seeing that movie in theaters when I don't even think I was out of high school yet, honestly. Maybe I was, because I think it was 2010. So it was like, yeah, it was right around the time I was about to graduate, or I had already graduated. But either way, it's like, my man, the notion of watching that film with none of the accumulated knowledge I have at this current moment. And then in hindsight, like, holy shit, that plot is like, it's extraordinary. And again, I urge everyone to go, definitely, it's an amazing film. But I went back through and I was reading Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. And basically, there is one portion of the book where he goes much more into disturbing detail in regard to the young Christian virgin that they had. If you remember in the film, it's by far toned down, extraordinarily toned down than it was in context in the book. So, but this is just a glimpse into what it really, just into the mind of Hunter S. Thompson at the very least. Okay, I understand he's a storyteller, but to create this out of whole cloth without ever being introduced to these ideas in reality and in realistic terms, then that's something that's very difficult for me to imagine. But it's a possibility, as much as I don't view it to be the case. So this is a portion out of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, just for brief reference and additional context. He shook his head, struggling to focus on the question. Shit, he said finally. I met her on the plane, and I had all that acid. He shrugged. You know those little blue barrels? Jesus, she's a religious freak. She's running away from home for something like the 5th time in 6 months. It's terrible. I gave her that cap before I realized. Shit, she's never even had a drink. Well, I said, it'll probably work out. We can keep her loaded and peddle her ass at the drug convention. He stared at me. She's perfect for this gig, I said. These cops will go $50 a head to beat her into submission and then gang fuck her. We can set her up in one of these backstreet motels, hang pictures of Jesus all over the room, then turn these pigs loose on her. Hell, she's strong. She'll hold her own. We coaxed Lucy down to the car, telling her that we thought it was about time to go meet Barbara. We had no trouble convincing her that she should take all her artwork, but she couldn't understand why my attorney wanted to bring her suitcase along. I don't want to embarrass her, she protested. She'll think I'm trying to move in with her or something. No, she won't, I said quickly, but this was all I could think of to say. I felt like Martin Bormann. What would happen to this poor wretch when we cut her loose? Jail? White slavery? So this is just a peek, a glimpse into the mind of Hunter S. Thompson. And again, it's knowing it is insane to read, and especially in hindsight, to attempt to internalize and imagine that after reading all of these allegations about Hunter, I just can't imagine a world. Stop, Sophie. Sorry, my dog's in trouble. I can't imagine a world where this is all just, you know, allegations, empty allegations and hearsay in regard to someone who very clearly was really it seems as if he was a sociopathic psychopath, right? And it's some sort of psychopath that definitely was attempting to. I don't think all of those. I just don't think abusing drugs at that level is you would ever even, other than the legitimate physical context of being physically addicted to a substance. I just can't imagine a world in which you are effectively compromising yourself in that way, and you're not entirely running from who you are and what you do and what you've done. And I just think that's, you know, I'm not entirely certain, but I definitely believe that there's more to the story in regards to the sinister nature of Hunter S. Thompson, and so in terms of Aldous Huxley and the connection to MK Ultra and the Tavistock Institute and the Esalen Institute, really just bridging the gap, Tavistock west side essentially, right? And then just understanding that the human potential movement would effectively be formed out of this strange space, Fear and Loathing in Big Sur, right? Just knowing that all of these prominent personalities entirely compromised by the intelligence apparatus and this new age occult ideology. Jesus. It is, my dog's about to throw up right now. Anyway, so I'll end it with this and we'll kind of wind down to a close. But I'll never forget, there was basically a quote that I used in one of my episodes on I believe it was definitely an Aldous Huxley quote, but whenever I pulled it, it was essentially, it was the False Memory Syndrome Foundation episode. That was what it was, which makes a lot of sense. But I said, imagine a world where the people have been conditioned to facilitate their own oppression, right? An Orwellian society where the trap of convenience has been convincingly laid only to usher in the all-powerful totalitarian technocratic state. A discouraging perspective version of reality, describing the largest open-air prison in human history where the shackles of enslavement have been restructured, modernized, and digitized. As Aldous Huxley once said in Brave New World, most men and women will grow up to love their servitude and will never dream of revolution. We're all Manchurian candidates now, escaping the confines of a society largely under hypnosis, only to find ourselves once again at the precipice in a brave new world under a dystopian version of mind control. One nation under Stockholm Syndrome, taken hostage and entirely consumed with defending their captors. As Aldous Huxley once said, one believes things because one has been conditioned to believe them. The nature of psychological compulsion is such that those who act under constraint remain under the impression that they are acting on their own initiative. The victim of mind manipulation does not know that he is a victim. To him, the walls of his prison are invisible, and he believes himself to be free. That he is not free is apparent only to other people. His servitude is strictly objective. And I just think there's nothing that is more relevant than making a statement that is coming to fruition. This is something that we are witnessing happen in real time. And if you go back, and I was reading, man, Aldous Huxley gave like an extraordinary prediction. Do you know where? In 1961 at the Tavistock Group, California Medical School. This is where. So he goes and he makes a statement where he eerily predicts there will be This is his words. There will be, in the next generation or so, a pharmacological method of making people love their servitude and producing dictatorship without tears, so to speak. Producing a kind of painless concentration camp for entire societies so that people will, in fact, have their liberties taken away from them, but will rather enjoy it because they will be distracted from any desire to rebel by propaganda or brainwashing enhanced by pharmacological methods. And this seems to be the final revolution. What the I mean, what? Like, that's just so. A year later, man, in 1962, after he makes that statement, Huxley gives a follow-up speech, The Ultimate Revolution, at the Berkeley Language Center. And this is where he expands on the earlier talk. He says, we are in process of developing a whole series of techniques which will enable the controlling oligarchy who have always existed and presumably will always exist to get people to love their servitude. This is it seems to me, the ultimate in malevolent revolutions, shall we say. And this is a problem which has interested me many years and about which I wrote 30 years ago a fable, Brave New World, which is an account of society making use of all the devices available and some of the devices which I imagine to be possible, making use of them in order to, first of all, to standardize the population, to iron out inconvenient human differences, to create, to say, mass produce models of human beings arranged in some sort of scientific caste system. Since then, I have continued to be extremely interested in this problem, and I have noticed with increasing dismay a number of the predictions which were purely fantastic when I made them 30 years ago have come true or seem in process of coming true. Here we are in the dystopian Brave New World. Man, that's fascinating. And so honestly, I should end it at that. And I have nothing but love for all of you guys, man. I appreciate you all more than you know. Being able to have these conversations, it gives me hope. It inspires me to move forward, to stay and remain on this path, you know, to intellectually challenge myself at all times and never take the easy way out. So it's an overexposure. It's definitely, there's a level of overexposure that will just disrupt your soul, you know, but it's the only way forward. It's the only way to know what to fundamentally defend yourself against. So I have nothing but love for you guys, and I appreciate you for showing up as always. And I want to do this a little bit more often so I can get some of these ideas out in a way in which I can breathe a sigh of relief, you know, and not feel like there's just so much, you know, like so much bouncing around in my brain that it's overwhelming at times, you know, but it should be. This isn't easy. But anyway, you guys mean the world to me. And obviously, the best place to support me is my Patreon, patreon.com/the Underclass podcast. We'll definitely be doing another, whatever this is here, episode 65 in the very near future, probably tomorrow night. I wouldn't be surprised. But either way, you know, I definitely, I feel like I just feel so grateful that I can engage with you guys directly in this way. So I'm going to keep trying to do a little bit more of this. as I said, for my own sake, at the very least, and get some of this out that I feel like accumulates over time to such an extent that I feel like, man, I don't know which direction to go sometimes when I'm having a conversation with people that I want to remain centered and on track and chronologically presenting information, but it's hard not to derail yourself at times. And it's just a personal plight of mine that I think many of you will probably understand. But anyway, the world, man, the fact we are aware of these things brings me hope, and it's a beautiful thing. So the more we can pursue intellectual growth together in this way, yeah, the better off we all are. And let's just remind ourselves what matters most, and not allow the demoralization to really take effect. So I love all you guys. I appreciate you more than you know. And man, I hope you have a wonderful weekend. And I'll catch you guys definitely on Tuesday. But either way, I'll catch you on the flip side, man. And I appreciate you again. And yeah, here we all are. I would have to say, bogged down, thoroughly understanding our position on the front lines, right, of the mind war. This is the reason this show is called the Underclass Podcast, is because we all share a common enemy, you know, and it looks a lot like the state more often than not. But either way, yeah, you guys are the best, and we'll definitely, I'll catch up with you guys on the next one. But nothing but love, and enjoy your weekend, and give your family and your friends that you appreciate, that are real ones, the real ones that you know won't disappear when you need them most. Give them the love and appreciation they deserve. I love you guys. I appreciate you as always. Have a good weekend.